conclusion is no. I mean, as much as they want to pretend he's a unicorn, he's this, he's that. I know Daniel Jeremiah came out the other day and said that he could be worth up to $20 million a year. We're starting to get into ridiculous territory. As important as George Kittle is, and I love George Kittle, if he left the team, I would be very upset about it. As important as he is, there is a limit to what you can pay a tight end. And that's just, there's a reason why Travis Kelce makes $10 million a year, why Austin Hooper at 10.5, I believe, is now the standard bearer, and you're talking about a doubling up of that from Daniel Jeremiah. There's no way. He does bring a very fantastic skill set, but you're talking about resetting a market to a point that just, it doesn't happen that often. So for me, he could start by asking for wide receiver money, but I think he's going to slot in somewhere around $13 million a year, which will reset the tight end market for sure, but it's going to fall short of those top tier wide receivers.
It's such a difficult question because when I was researching this, I kind of thought he's way better than Austin Hooper. There's an argument to be made about Travis Kelce, whether you feel Travis Kelce's a better receiver. I personally feel George Kittle's an overall better tight end than Travis Kelce. But $20 million, man, that's a lot of money, especially for a team that doesn't have too much cap flexibility like the 49ers. It's tough. To be honest with you, I kind of thought of Pawn Stars, which is kind of funny, but just what you said, start at $20 million and work your way down. It's like those guys go into the pawn shop with an outrageous number they know that's never going to happen. And when in reality, they have about half of that as their goal to walk out the door with. I was researching the wide receivers 2020 contracts, and Julio makes about $20 million. AJ Green's making about 18. Mike Evans is at 17.9. Tyreek Hill 17.7. Sammy Watkins 17.25. This is per over the cap. And honestly, it just comes down to do you value George Kittle as much as these teams value these players? But also, kind of playing devil's advocate, each team's salary and the way that they're set up is different. So it's hard to compare just, one for one dollars to cents, it's completely different. Matt, I could definitely see them going at about 13, anywhere from 13 to 15. I think 13.5 would be more than justified and a good contract, but maybe at a show of good faith, the 49ers might give it an extra mil or, backload it in some sense. But my question for you is, how much is the current situation with the pandemic going to impact the 49ers flexibility and being able to backload a contract or be able to just have that extra flexibility when negotiating?
I don't think the pandemic will have anything to do with it, really. I mean, it's just a matter of what you're willing to give George. And I think that maybe a viable alternative is, instead of, his average annual value being high, 13.5, 14, 15, whatever, maybe you try to talk him into 12.5 and just fully guarantee it for the length of the contract. In that way, he's getting financial security, and it keeps the team from being too flexed out in the cap, because we've seen what happens when teams overcommit. And you're talking about a number, $20 million. And again, this is coming from Daniel Jeremiah. We have no idea what he's actually asking for, but we're just going to go with the extreme, which is $20 million. And I can't believe Daniel Jeremiah, who, I respect, I can't believe he put that out there, because that's just patently ridiculous to say that a tight end is going to match Julio Jones, dollar for dollar. That to me is outlandish. And I know that George Kittle's unique. He can block, he can, catch passes, he's dynamic, and he's a leader of the team. He's the engine behind the team. For me, fully guarantee it. Let him know that he has financial security, that you want him on the team. But what you absolutely cannot do is do what some of these other teams have done. Again, like we've mentioned them before, the Los Angeles Rams, $20 million is roughly, off the top of my head, that's roughly 1/10 of the cap for one player. That's not how you're able to build long-term success. And as much as it would pain me to see George Kittle leave, that sometimes that's what happens, when teams are willing to overpay somebody on the free market. So if they don't get an extension done, that's definitely going to be, an option. Honestly, I think they'd franchise tag him first. That would bring them in well under what that asking price would be, without much recourse for George other than to hold out. But yeah, you have to be very careful with how much you're willing to commit to a single player, because I mean, let's face it, $20 million is only a couple million shy of what Jimmy G is making, and Jimmy G is the quarterback. So, for a tight end, a traditionally less valued position, a traditionally low paid position, as evidenced by, the highest contract being 10.5 per year. You have to be very careful with what you're willing to reset the market to. And I don't think that Parag Marathe and the regime are going to put out something that's completely ridiculous that people look at and go, oh God, why would they do that? They're very smart with their money. And so I definitely doubt that he doubles what the current top end for the tight ends are.
Now, the only reason I asked about the pandemic going on is because I've been seeing reports that the cap is going to go down, mainly due to the number of tickets and fans and revenue from being in stadiums. That's likely going to go down. So that was kind of my reasoning behind asking that question. Don't
believe the hype on that. Honestly, most of the NFL's money comes from its TV deals. So yeah, you're going to lose revenue and stuff, but it's going to be a drop in the bucket compared to what ESPN, NBC, CBS, and Fox put out to carry the games. And there was a report that they're going to increase the number of afternoon games that can be played in people's hometowns. So that's going to be a little bit different. There's going to be more exposure on TV. And I'm sure that the NFL and advertisers also understand that, hey, if fans can't go to the games, TV advertising is going to go up because more eyes are going to be on the product. It's one of those things where, yes, concessions are going to hurt. Yes, that, the ticket sales are going to hurt. But at the same time, you're also not paying staff to be there. You're not paying for the cost of food. You're not paying for the cost of cleanup on the stadium after an event is over. So there's a little bit of wiggle room, but most of the NFL's money is coming from the TV deals. So I don't expect the cap to drop. I say, if anything, it would be flat for a year and then continue its upward trajectory.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense, actually. But, George Kittle, it's kind of tough comparing him to current tight end contracts right now because he's, like I said, so unlike majority of these guys, maybe aside from Travis Kelce. But you look at guys like Kittle, you look at guys like Gronk, Tony Gonzalez, Vernon Davis in his prime, arguably Travis Kelce right now. And these guys redefined what it meant to be a tight end all in their own way. So it's difficult to kind of look at George Kittle and hold him up against this, molding of what he should be and what he should make, because he shattered the tight end record in his second year, I believe. So it's tough for me to think comparing it to other players like Austin Hooper. If you were to tell me right now, would you give George Kittle twice what Austin Hooper's getting? I would say yes, but then at the same time, it's like he's getting 10 million and positional value is tough. So there's a lot of arguments to be made, and I do see both sides. I just think strictly from a team and roster building perspective, the 49ers can't put all their eggs in this basket. Like you said, that's getting pretty close to Jimmy G money, and Jimmy G needs to be the highest paid player. It could be, really tough. If not, the only really scenario that happens is where your quarterback isn't and you're a successful team is if he's on a rookie deal, which well, remember, George Kittle is. He's only made, a couple million per year thus far. So he's going to get his. It's just a matter of how much. Now, Matt, I asked Jose Sanchez III of Sports Illustrated when I interviewed him, is there any scenario in which this doesn't work out for the 49ers? And aside from a franchise tag, George Kittle's playing in a different uniform soon?
No, I mean, the franchise tag is going to happen. Absolutely, it's going to happen. They're not just going to let him walk for free. And you better be sure that if you are going to trade him, you're going to get significant value in return for him. But even then, because he plays tight end, the optics will be that they didn't get enough no matter what it is. So they have to hope that they get a long-term deal done. Otherwise, he's going to play out the last, I doubt, and for all the talk and all the tough guy scenarios, I doubt that Kittle would sit out and miss any actual game time. Maybe, miss some camp here, miss some camp there, and it's going to be a weird camp anyway, so who knows how that's going to work. But, he's not going to miss regular season games. He's too fiery a competitor. He's too important to the team as far as leadership, and, he's a set an example and follow through sort of guy. But they're definitely going to franchise tag him if they can't get him long term. And, to your point of, Kittle shattering the tight end record. I mean, shatter is a relative term. It was less than, I believe it was less than 25 yards more than Kelsey on that season. So now you're talking about, well, how much more production is Kittle getting than Kelsey is? How much more valuable is Kittle than Kelsey? So you have to weigh it against who's there. And, of course, you always want to get more than the last guy, but you have to temper expectations on what you're actually going to get. And, again, it's early in the process. His agent's going to bat for him. That's what agents are for. We haven't heard anything from George. So who knows what's actually being said between, Parag and John and George. I'm sure they're all in contact, talking about it, trying to figure out what's going on. And, agents speak as agents speak. It remains to be seen what happens. But, this talk that he's 20 million or he's going to get wide receiver money, I think that's jumping the shark a little bit for a tight end, even one as important as George Kittle.
Okay. Next up on Niners News. Matt, he missed 2 years back-to-back with torn ACLs. What kind of production can you expect from a guy returning from back-to-back injuries like that?
It's tough. He had a second operation in September of 2019. And he said in an interview that his ACL and his meniscus was fine after having it repaired the year before. This operation was an unspecified sort of thing. If I were to guess, he was probably having some scar tissue cleaned up. So sometimes what happens is, when you're healing, the scar tissue builds up and sometimes you form adhesions, which, things are kind of sticking in places where they're not supposed to. That can cause pain. That can cause a decrease in the range of motion. He could be somebody who naturally has a lot of scar tissue. So getting that cleaned up is very important. And so you hope that the knee is structurally sound first and foremost. You want to get him through practice. You want to get him through camp. You want to get him through the preseason, and maybe, just get him out there on the field, just, in some contact just to see what he's got. It's one of those things where he injured the knee originally just cutting on air, just one of those things going through drills, and it happens. It's unfortunate that it's been 2 years because that makes it tough to project. You wonder, is everything okay? As we've seen recently with Todd Gurley, once those legs go, I mean, they could be gone, especially if there's some arthritic component to the knee. We don't know. He says the cartilage is fine, but we won't know until he gets out there. We hear the talk last year where it's like, man, I'm excited to be back, ready to get out there, ready to do the thing. And then, he'd practice for a day and then he'd be off for another 8, come back, practice again, knee flares up, boom, right back on IR. So for me, a realistic expectation, or should I say a hopeful expectation, is that he can actually make it through the preseason and, be somebody that you can rely on for, third downs. Because the one thing that he was good at in Minnesota was catching passes out of the backfield. And, with Tevin Coleman leading the 49ers last year with 21, that is an area that is lacking on offense.
I kind of envision Jeff Wilson type role for him, at least this year, if he's able to come back healthy. I totally agree with you. It's extremely important, first of all, get him through camp, get him through preseason, get him to take some hits again for the first time in 2 years. I mean, that's a long time. Guys are, shaking off rust for a few weeks after a season off, and he took season back-to-back off. So that's just, it's tough to come back from that. And just like you said, it's tough to even predict what his year should look like or what it could look like. I know his last 2 years in Minnesota, he totaled 539 in 2016 and rushing yards, and 570 rushing yards in 2017. So, I mean, and he wasn't the lead back at all. So it's promising. And I remember when the 49ers signed him, a lot of fans were like, why are we signing this guy? He's kind of a relatively unknown name. And then people started doing some in-depth reviews and articles on him. And Kyle Shanahan loves traits. And I think Jerick McKinnon has those traits. He's a pass-catching back. He's quick. He's shifty. And I just think best case scenario, he gets a Jeff Wilson type role in this system moving forward this year. And hopefully that's something he can build on because, man, he's been extremely, extremely disappointing. And it's not even something that's in his control. I mean, obviously, 2 injuries like that back to back, that's nothing that he had control of. But I'm very excited to see him healthy in this system. I think he could actually do some damage. Now, Matt, that running back room is going to get kind of crowded if he comes back healthy. Who's the odd man out?
It could very well be Jerick McKinnon. I mean, he restructured his deal. He's playing on the vet minimum this year. You know, there's nothing to say that if he gets out there and doesn't perform, that they just, you know, jettison him. You know, he got paid a lot of money to do a whole little bit, you know, and unfortunately, the best ability is availability. The best trade is being able to be out there and actually playing, you know, and there comes a point where, yes, they signed him to a big contract because they liked him. That hasn't worked out so far. And if it, you know, continues to be that way, maybe it's time you just say, you know what, we'll stick with what we got, you know, because it worked last year. Now, Matt Breida is out the door, so that does create an extra space for him. But if they do end up cutting McKinnon and going with somebody like, you know, obviously Raheem Mostert's going to be the starter. And if you want to go with Tevin Coleman and Jeff Wilson Jr. behind him, you know, you can do that. They have a couple of undrafted free agents that people are a little bit high on coming into camp. So it's all going to depend. The thing that you have to remember is this is a running back coming off of 2 years of serious knee injury. You know, there's no guarantee that he's ever going to make it back. And if that's the case, then it's time to cut bait.
Totally agree. Now, that's obviously worst case scenario. He doesn't come back healthy. He doesn't come back 100%. Best case scenario, you talked about your hopeful scenario, kind of what you would hope to see out of him. Absolute best, blows you away. You didn't expect this. What does that look like?
That's going to be, you know, 30, 35 catches, you know, a couple 100 yards, maybe a few touchdowns here and there, you know, 2 or 3, especially on third down, being a safety valve for Jimmy, especially when you're, you know, running George out there in, you know, in the middle of the field in intermediate routes, and you really need that guy underneath, you know, to get stuff done. Having that running back, that safety valve there, that kind of releases George to be able to get down the field rather than having to, you know, maybe block and release to the flat, you know. That's the best case scenario for him, honestly. Yeah, I know that he did some returning in Minnesota, so maybe you can put him back on punt returns, but you know, for the amount of money that you've already paid him and the injury history, I don't know if that's going to be realistic. Although once we get to, you know, who's going to be in the room with the wide receivers, because that's becoming a crowded room, you know, maybe Richie James isn't here and you need that punt returner, and that could be something that he could do. But yeah, his best case scenario is for him to stay healthy this year. That bottom line, you know, even before all the stats, anything else, you want to see him be able to get out on the field and play football without thinking too much about the last 2 years full of injuries for him.
Yeah, if he doesn't go on injured reserve once this season, I would consider that a successful year for him. It's just been an injury-riddled time with the 49ers, and I don't believe he was injured with the Vikings, at least seriously, you know, so it's really unfortunate to see. Now, obviously, just like you said, he is on a vet minimum. He restructured his deal, so he knows this time is up. How much does that pressure work both ways? You know, like, do you think it might inspire him to play really, really well and really hard, but also that risk is there that he might push it too hard and re-injure himself? How much does he have to manage that battle kind of mentally and make sure he's not going too hard and put his body at risk even further?
Well, that's the key. It's not going too hard, because you can have all the desire in the world. You know, when I was younger, I could play basketball. Now I'm older, you know, I've had injuries and stuff, and it just doesn't work the same. You know, it's just, he's had 2 years of serious knee injuries, and the worst thing that he can do is be too hungry to get out there and put himself at risk. You know, the knee is what it's going to be, and it's either going to work right or it's not. And there's no amount of desire that's going to change the anatomy. Again, the aforementioned Todd Gurley, I'm sure that he still desires to be a top 5 back in the league, but the proof is in the pudding that he's just not. He can't do the things that he used to do. And, you know, worst case scenario is that's the case with Jet McKinnon, and he, you know, he has to kind of retire that Jet nickname. So you do want to be careful with those sort of things. You can get overhyped, and you can go too hard, and you can hurt yourself. So, but at the same time, you don't want to be so passive that you're afraid to get hurt, and then you get hurt because you're doing things differently than you normally would. There's a fine line that you have to play. And, you know, as we saw with Jimmy Garoppolo this last year, he thought about the knee almost all year. and he would say at the time, no, the knee's good. The knee's good. I'm not thinking about it. But in retrospect, he'll tell you, yeah, I was thinking about the knee. It took X amount of weeks for it to, feel this way. It took X amount of weeks until I stopped thinking about it altogether. There's no amount of, you can't change how your mental state takes as far as healing goes. The body can heal really quick, but it's all about your mindset.
Yeah, it really is a fine line. And Jimmy's the perfect example of this. Granted, he didn't come back off of 2 back-to-back ACL tears, but still, he came back from a serious injury. He's wearing the brace, and, he would tell media, just like you said, after the fact, it was on my mind. I was conscious of it as I was out there. And I think the most important thing you said is not being overly careful to the point that you're kind of maneuvering your body differently, because that can also cause injuries. We've seen it in the NFL plenty of times. Guys are going out there scared, going out there, overly cautious, and then that causes an injury itself. Now, Matt, last question on this. With the 49ers this past season, I don't know who you would swap for him. If you swap any back and plug Jerick McKinnon in, are they better or worse? And I know it's hard to tell because we didn't see much of him healthy, but if he's fully healthy, the full best you could expect for him, would they be better off with him this season than any other back?
Not with any other back. I think Raheem has clearly earned the opportunity to be the starter, so I wouldn't swap him with Raheem Mostert. Tevin Coleman may or may not be a toss-up depending on how you feel about what McKinnon's prospects for recovering fully are. To me, if you're looking for a twice injured running back to come and make you significantly better or worse, then you have more problems than what's in that running back room. I think that what he can do is be a nice supplement for the offense, and maybe they get marginally better. I don't think that if he was healthy that they would be any worse at all. But you just hope, you hope that he comes in and can deliver and, not have immense amounts of rust like we saw last year with Jason Verrett before they put him on IR in week 3. And of course, Jason Verrett was a Pro Bowl caliber corner before he started getting injured, and he missed 2-3 years in a row. And you could just see that rust was just on there. Not playing takes its toll on your skill set. So, Verrett will be back this year. So we'll see if, maybe because he went on injured because he was injured. But maybe exactly, maybe a little Noxzema for the skin, but he was burnt toast. It was so bad. But having a healthy amount of time that you can, hey man, I'm not rehabbing from an injury, and that's really important, and that's why we expect Jimmy Garoppolo to take a mental step forward. And Kyle talked about that the other day. When you don't have to worry about rehabbing and you just worry about playing football and establishing your skill set, then that's where good things happen. So it just remains to be seen how much better McKinnon at full strength, if he's there, would make this roster. So, to swap him out, at this point, it'd be, Jeff Wilson Jr. really is what you're swapping out for.
It's funny you say that, because that was kind of my best case scenario for him moving forward, would have been a Jeff Wilson type year. I only asked that to kind of see what potential he had essentially at his best case scenario. So I totally agree. Unfortunately, they wouldn't be worse off with him, but they're not, exponentially better because they have McKinnon in the backfield. But, only time will tell. Obviously, we're both hoping the best for him.
Absolutely.
Great McKinnon, great 49ers backfield, so there's no harm in that. Next up on Niners News.
It's getting close. That second round draft capital will only get you so far. And, he needs to come out with fire in his belly, and he needs to compete, instead of, and people love to get on him on Twitter, hey, you're not working out. Why are you showing this other stuff, this and this and that? And that's cool. Like, I'm on his side. Live your life, enjoy life, do what you want to do, but you got to show up on Sundays. And, last season, not so much, man. It was pretty bad. I remember, 2 touchdowns for him? I think he had 2. He had 1 against Arizona. He had 1 against Pittsburgh. And the Pittsburgh one was great. It won the game, but, You're talking about a guy that had all the promise in the world, but there is a mentality problem there that's not going to be in somebody like Deebo Samuel. That's not going to be in somebody like Brandon Ayuk. That's not going to be somebody, in somebody like Jalen Hurd. Even Trent Taylor. Trent Taylor can't stay healthy, but when he is healthy, I mean, he's out there and he's playing hard. They're just going to run out of room. You forget about people like Travis Benjamin, who's on the team, and things like that. There are so many receivers here. You're talking about losing a guy like Richie James, who brought a ton of energy, and Richie James might be gone. Dante's living off of his draft position right now, and if he comes into camp and doesn't perform that way, it's going to be another season riding the pine for him, and then he can, cat paw his way right out of San Francisco.
Oh man, I love Dante Pettis. It's a shame how this kind of has turned out so far. I was extremely excited when they drafted him. Just reading all the reports, people were hyped about him. Some even had them as their top receiver in that class.
And rightfully so. He has all the physical tools. He just has a between the ears problem that he cannot figure out.
Yeah, 100%. And, just looking back on it, that second half of his rookie year, he turned it on. Whatever he needed to do to get it together, he got it together. Mentally, physically, everything was put together, and it was a finished product on the field. You could see he was putting on clinics on offense, shaking defenders out of their skates, juking guys into the end zone, catching, deep. But that, I don't think that was last season, but it was his rookie season. That back of the end zone catch against Minnesota before Jimmy got injured. Oh, that was one of the most beautiful catches I think I've ever seen. And Dante Pettis has an immense potential. It's just a matter of putting it together. That's what's so unfortunate about the situation. He like you said, he's been living off his draft capital, and that fire's slowly burning down. That flame's diminishing, very quickly. So the 49ers aren't, keeping it a secret. Look what they did this year. They went and got Brandon Ayuk. Look what they did last year. They went and got Deebo Samuel. They're saying, Dante, we want to work with you, but you got to work with us. We're building this offense. We're surrounding you with other weapons so that you're not being double teamed, triple teamed, whatever the case may be, and you still can't kind of get it done. So it's like, what's the case here? Matt, you touched on it being more of a mental issue than anything. With younger guys, sometimes it takes a little bit of adjustment to get to the NFL and then, to kind of get comfortable playing in there. It seemed like he got comfortable and then he took a step back. Is that something that you've seen before or something that, is common?
You see it sometimes, and you hope he bounces back. You see guys that have a promising rookie year and then all of a sudden, maybe it's not that great the next year. I mean, perfect example of a sophomore slump is Baker Mayfield. Great rookie year, struggled a little bit this year. But the difference is I see fight in Baker Mayfield. What I don't see is Dante Pettis willing to put forth the effort and the fight to kind of overcome that mental hurdle. He seems to pack it in, and, you can't pack it in the NFL. In the NFL, it's either step up or step aside because there's somebody waiting to take your job. And they've shown, this regime in John and Kyle, they've shown, hey, we need wide receivers. And we may have drafted you with a second round pick, but guess what? You're not getting it done. So the next year, what do? We're going to get another second rounder because, Pierre Garçon didn't step up. We had to get rid of him. Now we need somebody to fill that role. You didn't step up. Emmanuel Sanders left. Brandon Ayuk, next man up. It's one of those situations where you're going to quickly find yourself out of a job unless you're willing to fight for your position. You have to fight, scratch, claw for everything that you get, not just in the NFL, but in life. And, you can coast through. And again, it's one of those situations where you see it. Immensely talented people who had an easy time in high school and in college, he's the all-time leader in kick returns and touchdowns in college football. That just shows that he was that much better than college athletes. But this is an entirely different breed. Hard work will beat talent when talent doesn't work hard. And right now it appears that Dante Pettis isn't willing to put in the work to become the best version of himself that the 49ers need and that he owes to himself.
Yeah, I love that quote. Hard work will beat talent when talent doesn't work hard. It's exactly what's happening here, unfortunately. When I spoke with Kyle Posey of Niners Nation a few weeks ago, he was telling me that the kind of running joke in training camp was if there's any sort of contact that's about to happen, Dante's going to shy away from that pass. And unfortunately, I think we've seen that in the NFL. We've seen that in games. He shy away from contact, whatever the case may be. He hears footsteps and he doesn't, fight for the ball. Perfect example of what to do. I'm thinking of Debo finishing through that pass against Arizona where he was being mauled and he somehow still caught that ball. Look, that's not the expectation, but the effort level, it should be the expectation. You want to see guys fighting, giving it their all, going out there and being a dog. We've constantly been saying you want your guys to have that dog mentality. Dante's a cat. I mean, that's just unfortunately how it is, how it's been. Now, Matt, the 49ers currently, looking at their roster here, they have Trent Taylor coming back from injury, Deebo Samuel returning, Richie James, Jalen Hurd also coming back from injury, Kendrick Bourne. They signed Travis Benjamin, and then they also have guys like Sean Poindexter, Chris Thompson, Chris Finke. My apologies if I'm pronouncing that correctly. How likely is it that he actually is the odd man out?
Again, he's still living off that draft capital, and I think that there's enough of a cap hit from his signing bonus, from his second round signing bonus, that it's going to be, I think his dead cap is like $2 million, but that's enough to maybe keep him on the roster. He's just going to be, again, buried down that depth chart. And listen, we do talk about dogs, and we talk about, you want to see that dog. In Dante's case, we don't even need to see a big dog. We need to see, even a little dog will suffice, and there have been finesse receivers in the NFL before, guys that kind of alligator arm when contact is coming. And, you kind of accept that in some of those guys and you work to their strength, which I know that Kyle tries to do. The biggest thing about Dante is once something bad happens, it's like dropping a pebble down a mountain. It just snowballs and gets bigger and bigger. And he has a confidence problem. If you can get him out of his own head, maybe every now and again, he's going to have that, oh God, I don't want to take this hit. So, he doesn't catch the pass or whatever. But then at other times, you're going to see that beautiful footwork that breaks a defender down, and he's able to run that crisp route, and then maybe he gets, 12 yards on a 3rd and 10, and gets down before contact. You don't need him to be, not everybody's going to be Deebo Samuel, who was a running back playing wide receiver, essentially. I mean, Deebo's a different type of dog. There's not too many of him where he's running to contact instead of, away from contact, or even just, incidental contact. But just a little more fight, stop getting down on yourself when bad things happen, because bad things happen to everybody. But again, take a look at Jimmy G for an example. I mean, and people talk about Jimmy G and this and that, but this is one of the things that makes Jimmy G so special and why he is the franchise quarterback for the 49ers. Short memory. Yeah, something bad happened. Okay, he had an interception. The Pittsburgh game, perfect example. He had 2 tipped interceptions in the first half, but he still came back and won the game. He's still going to try to fit that ball in there. It's again, things happen all the time. There's plays that are going to be out of your control, but you have to have a short memory, because the NFL has a short memory as far as game situation. That play's done and over with. You got to move on. So if he can do that, there could be some hope of salvaging him. But as it stands right now, man, he's awfully close to getting out of town.
I think what was most telling was him not dressing on the Super Bowl. The biggest game in their entire career, biggest game since, Shanahan and Lynch have been with the 49ers. And, your second round pick from a year ago isn't even dressed. It's like, that's got to be telling. And we've known Kyle Shanahan can kind of hold a grudge. Once you get in that doghouse, it's like he locks that door and throws away the key. We saw it with Pettis. We saw it with Breida for a bit with his fumbling
Breida's
issue.
In Miami.
Exactly. That was going to be my next point. So I would imagine if Dante was also an undrafted free agent, he would likely be in Philly.
He would have been gone by now.
Exactly. So,
and there's no guarantee they don't move him before training camp.
There's no guarantee at all.
All it takes is a team to lose a wide receiver and then, John Lynch picks up the phone. Hey, I got this former second-round pick that you can have for cheap. Oh, okay, yeah, we'll take him. And then Dante Pettis is gone. You know, he needs to show some fight. Otherwise, he's going to be out of town. There's no question about that. This is his last year in San Francisco unless he makes something happen.
And, you know, we certainly hope he does because he's shown he has
Absolutely.
it. Yeah, he's got physical, mental. He could, when he puts it together, he's a finished product out there on the field, and he's absolutely lethal. Him paired with Debo, Brandon Ayuk, if that pans out, Trent Taylor and Jalen Hurd, if they come back healthy, and a George Kittle in the middle, this offense just went from running 200 yards a game to passing 400 yards a game. So, you mean, man, it's going to be something to see. Hopefully it all pans out, but
yeah,
that's the deal for us today, guys. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Niners News here on 49ers Hive. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. Our handles are below on the screen. And make sure you like, subscribe, and leave a comment below.
Go ahead and click the bell for notifications. We're bringing you 49ers content all the time.
Thanks, guys.
Much love to everybody, and go Niners.